Imagine serving tables your whole life, invisible to the world, until one small act of kindness changes everything. Now picture two hungry kids, forgotten by society, being fed by a stranger with barely anything of his own. 20 years later, a helicopter thunders down on a quiet street, stopping above a rundown house. The entire neighborhood watches in shock as the doors open, not for a celebrity, not for a president, but for that same humble black waiter no one ever noticed. What happens next will leave you breathless. Stay with this story, and if it touches your heart even once, don't forget to subscribe, because kindness like this deserves to be remembered. Curtis Malone had always lived a simple life, working double shifts at Marlowe's Diner in a small Georgia town, where the people barely noticed the man who filled their coffee cups and cleared their plates. But behind his quiet eyes lived a man who knew pain, who knew hunger, and who remembered what it meant to go to bed with nothing but a growling stomach and prayers. It was the fall of 2005, and rain poured relentlessly on a Tuesday evening when the two soaked and trembling figures first appeared at the edge of the diner's windows. Two orphaned siblings, barely more than bones and threadbare clothes, clutching each other like life preservers in a storm. Curtis saw them while scraping grease off a plate, and without a second thought, he stepped outside with a steaming plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and a warm chocolate pie slice he had set aside for himself earlier, placing the food gently in their shivering hands and saying nothing more than, "Eat slow, now it's hot." The kids said nothing, eyes wide, then mouths full, and Curtis never expected to see them again, assuming they would disappear like ghosts back into the streets. But he kept setting out food under the back porch step every evening, just in case. Never speaking of it, never wanting credit. His life remained the same: work, walk, serve, and sleep, until 2 decades passed. His joints grew stiffer, and the diner closed for good, leaving him with nothing but a creaky porch and a heart full of faded memories. It was on a strangely quiet Thursday morning in 2025, while Curtis sat whittling wood by his porch, that a roar filled the sky. He looked up to see a sleek black helicopter circling overhead, then lowering slowly toward his yard, sending leaves flying and neighbors pouring out of their homes in disbelief, phones raised and mouths hanging open as the aircraft settled just feet from his porch. Out stepped 2 suited men with earpieces, followed by a tall, elegant black man and a young woman with sharp eyes and a wide, tearful smile. Curtis blinked, confused, heart pounding, until the man stepped forward and said, "Mr. Malone, I believe you knew us once. We were starving, and you gave us a chance at life." The memories came rushing back as Curtis's mouth opened, then trembled, because he suddenly saw those same eyes, the same ones from 2 decades ago, now filled with gratitude and success. The man, now known as Darius Beaumont, was the founder of a global tech company, and his sister Lila was an award-winning human rights lawyer. They had spent years tracking Curtis down, searching public records, diner archives, and even social media threads until they found the man who had saved them with nothing more than warmth and food. "We owe everything to you," Lila whispered, kneeling beside him and holding his hands as tears rolled freely. Curtis could barely breathe as Darius added, "We're not here just to thank you, we're here to take you home," revealing they had built a luxury villa in Napa Valley and wanted Curtis to live out the rest of his days in peace, dignity, and luxury. But Curtis, stunned and overwhelmed, asked only one question: "Why me?" To which Darius replied, "Because when we had no one, you didn't just feed us, you saw us. You treated us like we mattered, and we never forgot." They helped him into the helicopter as the entire town watched, stunned, some silently ashamed they'd never treated Curtis with anything more than passing politeness, others snapping videos that would go viral within hours. As they lifted off, the wind tearing through the quiet street, Curtis looked down and waved, the smallest tear sliding down his cheek, not for regret, but for the strange and beautiful symmetry of life. And yet, that was only chapter 1. The Next phase of Curtis's life unfolded like a miracle. He now lived in a breathtaking glass home surrounded by vineyards, with caretakers, fresh meals, art classes, and a library that took his breath away. But more than that, Darius and Lila spent time with him regularly, even calling him Pops, a title he never dreamed he'd earn. The story made national news, the waiter who changed 2 lives and got a mansion in return. But Curtis never wanted headlines. What shocked the world even more came 1 month later, when Curtis asked to visit the same corner of the street where he'd first found them, only this time he brought with him a new initiative, the Malone Foundation. Funded entirely by Darius and Lila but named solely after Curtis, the foundation aimed to provide hot meals, emergency shelter, and tutoring for homeless children across all 50 states. Curtis insisted it begin in his hometown and personally handed out the first meals, sitting on the same bench where he once worked double shifts, now as the honored guest of a city that finally recognized his heart. But the most incredible twist came during a gala held in his honor, where a video montage showed dozens of other children who had found meals behind the diner during those years, most of them unaware it was Curtis all along now. Grown and living full lives because of his silent generosity. Tears streamed freely in the crowd as a choir of kids sang his favorite hymn, and Curtis stood, humble as always, whispering, "I was just doing what I wished someone had done for me." The gala raised millions. But Curtis stayed simple jeans, his old worn cap and his gentle voice, always insisting the credit went to God's timing. In the final chapter of his life, Curtis chose to spend his days visiting shelters, talking to kids, reminding them that someone cares. He never married, never had kids of his own, but when asked if he had family, he'd laugh and say, "More than I can count." And every year, on that exact rainy Tuesday in October, a new plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes would be served to every child in the Malone shelters across America. Curtis's tradition carried forward. On the final day of his life, Curtis passed peacefully in his sleep at age 84, with Lila and Darius holding his hands, and a final whisper from him, "Still can't believe y'all flew a helicopter to my lawn," leaving them laughing through their tears. His funeral was attended by thousands, broadcast across networks, and his gravestone read, "He fed the hungry. He changed the world." And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Because in a world that often forgets the small acts, we're here to remind you they matter more than you know.